I really just kept things to myself, principally because I was aware of Edwina's intense dislike of being discussed and felt that it would be disloyal to speak about her. Sorry to interrupt myself again, but what? Intense dislike of being discussed? Edwina is running around the world, and the actual newspapers are talking about it. If she really hated to be discussed, she wouldn't be doing any of that. Or if she was, she would be way more discreet about it. What she doesn't like is to be called to account. And there's only one person in this world who has the right to call her to account, as he should, and that's her husband, and he's not even doing it because he's like, well, I don't want to be disloyal. What would you consider your wife cheating on you with like 5 different people at a time? Does that fall under your umbrella, your definition of disloyal? Wouldn't you say that when a person does that, it might be okay to start, raising some questions? I understand that he didn't want to talk about what Edwina was doing with everybody because, why air your dirty laundry? I get that part of what he's saying. But for him to hide behind this idea that he was really taking the moral high ground. No, you were being a coward, okay? So don't cloak your cowardice in moral integrity and be like, well, I just really want to make sure that I'm honoring what she likes. She doesn't like people to talk about her, and I wanted to be a loyal husband. Man, pull it together and get a backbone. Hello, how are you? Welcome to my channel. My name is Denise, and today we are doing chapter 8 of the Mountbattens. This chapter is called A Terrible Scandal. Now, the terrible scandal isn't actually anything worse than what she's usually been doing, but according to social mores, it was considered really shocking. So, we're going to get into all of that. The first part of the chapter, we're going to sort of skim a little bit, only because the emphasis is really on the fact that Dicky's doing very well at work. We see a little bit of his hubris, a little bit of how he would sort of change the story if it would make him sound better. We get a little bit of that. They're having some money troubles because of the way they do spend money. Someone's got to bring in money if Edwina's going to spend her inheritance the way she is. And so they're going to have to do a little bit of scrambling to figure out how they're going to keep living the way they live. But then I would say the last 2/3 of the chapter are all about the quote unquote scandal that Edwina found herself in. Now, the irony is, the newspapers decided to report that she was doing a certain thing. She was doing that, but not with the person they said that she was doing it with. So they got it right, they got it wrong. This is also the first time we get any hint that Dicky was really, really appalled at his wife's behavior and very jealous that he couldn't manage to rein her in or to really compete with her lovers. We haven't gotten any quotes from Dicky thus far really exposing a jealous side. Of course, we've seen him write letters to her, being this real Casper Milquetoast, laying down and taking it and basically being like, it's all my fault that you feel like you have to run around. If only I could be more of what you wanted, So in a lot of ways, I sort of appreciate this other side to him because it's just, like at some point I was going to be like, are you not mad about this at all? Do you not feel agitated at all at what your wife is doing? You're just okay with all of it? So it's sort of interesting to see kind of a more human response to what he sees going on. It's fairly derogatory to the lover that she has taken. And I don't know that. Well, we'll talk about it in a minute when we get there. Anyway, let's go ahead and dive in. A terrible scandal. Now, it begins by saying that in August of 1931, Dicky returned to Malta as fleet wireless officer against the backdrop of the deepening sterling crisis and formation of Ramsay MacDonald's national government. On 15th of September, sailors of the Atlantic Fleet at Invergordon mutinied in protest against pay cuts, but the Mediterranean Fleet had already commenced its autumn cruise, making communication between ships more difficult. Dicky, responsible for monitoring communications and any sign of unrest, was later to claim that he personally had prevented the Mediterranean Fleet following suit by stopping all communications and warning Sir Ernest Chatfield, the C&C's chief of staff, of murmurings of discontent. But if true, Chatfield made no reference to it in his memoirs, and it looks like the myth-making to which Dicky was increasingly prone in old age. But he wasn't all full of hot air, because Dicky might have over-pronounced his involvement in that particular crisis, but As the fleet wireless officer, Dicky was responsible for radio communications throughout the 70 ships of the Mediterranean fleet. Based either abroad, the fleet's flagship, or in the Castilla on Malta, he set up a sophisticated communication center, which allowed all wireless communications of the fleet to be monitored and analyzed, and created a system whereby all ships were able to acknowledge receipt of a message within a minute. He recognized that efficient communications remained essential to any naval operation, and that in signals intelligence, wireless discipline was essential in invading detection and coordinating a large strike force. Now, we're going to get a whole list of things that he was doing that make him seem like a very top-notch individual, but one has to ask themselves, where did this information come from? Because, you know those write-ups they make you do about yourself in the military, or that your upper leadership has to write about you, and they're always really inflated. You know, if you do like one thing, they word it so that it sounds as though you saved everybody from damnation. But so I'm not really sure where this information comes from. I can't remember the proper name, but they're sort of like performance reviews. And the Navy calls them one thing, and the Air Force calls them another, and the Army calls them something else. And I don't know what they call them in England. But just the very wording of this reminds me of different things I've seen. But this paragraph says that he improved training, insisted that ships were constantly tested in decoding, and that pay was improved. Above all, he fostered a strong esprit de corps and personal loyalty amongst his telegraphists, whom he regarded as the unsung heroes aboard the ship. He made a point of visiting every ship in the fleet uniquely in his own private motorboat, and for each ship and individual he kept a card of successes and failures, encouraging competitiveness through a series of competitions. At weekends, he would take groups of midshipmen out on his boat to swim and generally relax. Maybe he did do all those things, but it's the esprit de corps that made me raise my eyebrows, because that's one of their favorite terms in these reports. But anyway, we do know that he was incredibly competitive. So it makes sense that he would know everybody and that he would create these little competitions between everybody, because he did do that all the time. Now, he was very techie. One of his stunts was to ensure all 70 ships were able to hear King George V's first address to the nation on Christmas Day of 1932. It encouraged him to press for the all-silent film projectors in the fleet to be converted into sound projectors so that they could show sound films, designing a loudspeaker system himself that was cheaper and therefore financially possible. Another thing that Dicky did to demonstrate how coordinated he was and how technologically advanced he was a demonstration staged over several days to every officer based in Malta on the importance of wireless communications. This display simulated fleet action with the messages distributed to the audience as they might be to the admiral staff on a flagship. There was even an officer on an imitation destroyer bridge who added to the excitement by receiving orders from the captain and relaying them to an imaginary flotilla of destroyers. This was Dicky in his role of showman, a role he was to play many times over in his career. Okay, well, but when Dicky's doing really well at his job, that is our indication that all is not well with Edwina, because he does well in his job as a reaction to her running around. While Dicky settled into his new job, Edwina remained in London. Now that Dicky was prepared to turn a blind eye to her lovers, they didn't hold the same attraction. What a surprise. See, I was thinking about it this morning, and, you know, last time we came together, I was just flummoxed, confused. I couldn't understand, like, why is she doing this to Dicky? And then I realized she and Dicky's personalities are so completely opposite. She's this free spirit. He's this person who is so competitive that even fun things stop being fun because he has to get it down so meticulously. Everything has to be exactly right. You know, like you couldn't play a board game with this person without it becoming a whole thing. And he's just very straight-laced and type A. And she is so, you know, whatever, feels good in the moment. You know, I don't want to have plans. I don't want to do anything that is anything other than what I want to do. And he is disciplined and intense. And so I feel like it's as simple as her rebelling against his personality. Like just being so annoyed by how he has to make everything so intense all the time. Like, can't we just have fun? Why do you always have to make everything a competition? Why do you always have to get so upset about every little thing as far as everything being perfect with the servants and the staff? And, you know, I just think that her running around on him might have just been as immature as her just not liking him, you know, and just being like, you want everything your way? Well, fine, whatever. I'm going to go out and do my own thing. Like, you're so annoying. Anyway, I mean, that is really immature, but you think about when they got married, but they were young when they got married, but then also she had never had anybody challenge her really in any way. So maybe she just really was a difficult person to get along with. If she didn't like you, she'd get at you by being difficult. And we have other quotes coming up, which are super helpful. From the kids talking about what it was to be in a house with their mother, she seems like she was incredibly petty and difficult and would get her feelings hurt really easily. And then that would be some reason why she was going to kind of get back revenge at you because you'd hurt her feelings, even if you hadn't been trying to. So she just seems like she was living in her own head, making up her own rules about how to interact with others. She broke off her relationship with Hugh and Laddie and returned to America, but soon there was a new man in her life, of course. Bobby Sweeney was 10 years younger, a 6'3" American Rhodes Scholar at Oxford, who had just been selected with his brother Charles to play golf for the university. He would win the 1937 Amateur Championship. With his easy charm, movie star looks, and wealth, he divided his time between homes in London, Palm Beach, and Long Island. He was an important catch. Well, he's got money, and even though Edwina's got a lot of it herself, she's got money troubles too, because she's living high off the hog. But there's no money coming in. I mean, Dicky has a job, but he's not making money at the rate that he can refill the coffers at the way she spends it. The book says it was not only in her love life that the chickens had come home to roost. Years of unsustainable, profligate spending, coupled with a drop in investment income, meant some tough decisions had to be taken. It was not helped when Britain came off the gold standard in September and the pound dropped in value by more than a quarter. Things are very gloomy, noted Edwina, doing everything possible. She promptly went out shopping. It was clear that she would have to become a tax exile for the next 2 years if she was not to pay 60% of her income in tax. Whoa. They have 60% tax? For the first time, I understand why David, Prince of Wales, wanted to get away from England because he didn't want to pay the taxes. And I was like, dude, do your part, okay? But now I'm like, 60% of your income in tax? I can understand why he wasn't running back to the shores of Old England. One of the largest drains had been Brook House, with running costs of £16,000 over the previous year. And this included 27 indoor and 2 outdoor servants when the Mountbattens were in residence, and even 17 when they were away. They looked with envy at Mary's house around the corner with its latest gadgets, spot-lit squash court over the garage, and cocktail bar in the cellar, and yet was far less expensive to run. There was no real emotional attachment to what sometimes felt like a gloomy museum. Selling it and its contents would produce, after tax, £7,500 a year, plus a savings of £1,000 on staff. A problem was that Sir Ernest's will had forbidden such a sale. But eventually, a way was found, and the sale was announced in October of 1931. Some items Edwina wished to keep, rather than to pay to store them. She offered them to Prince of Wales, who was furnishing his new home, so her Jade, Van Dykes, Romneys, and Rayburns found themselves temporarily at Fort Belvedere. One person who witnessed his receiving of these gifts said that he was absolutely thrilled like a child and was going around in circles arranging them and where they would go. He did love some trinkets. The house itself, however, found no takers, and after 18 months of staying empty, it was pulled down. In its place arose an 8-story block of flats with 2 upper floors, an enormous penthouse that Edwina had reserved for herself. Sir Ernest's wish had been complied with. In November of 1931, Edwina set off to Malta with her daughters, Pamela and Patricia. The Mountbattens were to be a family again. Dicky was pleased. Lovely to have the old girl back, he wrote in his diary that night. He was able to report to his mother of the improved marital relations. You know, he really needs to cut those apron strings with his mom, because enough already of writing to his mom about every little thing that has to do with he and Edwina. He needs to grow up, be a husband, tell his wife how it's going to be. Not in a mean way, but like, you know, you made promises to each other, so why are you rolling around taking it and being like, I really hate this. I guess I'll write my mom a letter about it. Why don't you just deal with your wife? Anyway, he wrote and said to her, it's funny, but until this year, I've never really discussed my married life with anyone at all. I guess his mom doesn't count. I really just kept things to myself, principally because I was aware of Edwina's intense dislike of being discussed and felt that it would be disloyal to speak about her. Sorry to interrupt myself again, but what? Intense dislike of being discussed? Edwina is running around the world, and the actual newspapers are talking about it. If she really hated to be discussed, she wouldn't be doing any of that. Or if she was, she would be way more discreet about it. What she doesn't like is to be called to account. And there's only one person in this world who has the right to call her to account, as he should, and that's her husband, and he's not even doing it because he's like, well, I don't want to be disloyal. What would you consider your wife cheating on you with like 5 different people at a time? Does that fall under your umbrella, your definition of disloyal? Wouldn't you say that when a person does that, it might be okay to start, raising some questions? I understand that he didn't want to talk about what Edwina was doing with everybody because, why air your dirty laundry? I get that part of what he's saying. But for him to hide behind this idea that he was really taking the moral high ground. No, you were being a coward, okay? So don't cloak your cowardice in moral integrity and be like, well, I just really want to make sure that I'm honoring what she likes. She doesn't like people to talk about her, and I wanted to be a loyal husband. Man, pull it together and get a backbone. Okay, actually being able to talk things over has helped so much and really improved the situation with Edwina so very much. It's funny, but now that I see her as she is and not on this old-fashioned pedestal I had put her on, I'm really ever so much more fond of her. She's so very, very sweet when one can talk freely with her and see all her difficulties and laugh her out of them. I do feel we're going to be happy. Happier, really, than we've ever been. I said this in the last episode. I think that when the skeletons are out of the closet and you don't have to pretend that they aren't there, there is a levity that comes with that. But, enough of this already. Edwina is very, very sweet when I could talk freely with her and see all her difficulties. Of course, she's going to be sweet when you continue to always side with her. Like, she comes to you and tells you about how it's really hard with this boyfriend and it's really hard with that boyfriend. And, I was just like really disappointed when Laddie did this and Hugh did that. When you decide that you aren't going to, rear up as you should, of course she's going to suddenly be more comfortable with you because, she didn't have to hide things from you, so that's going to make her feel more comfortable. But you're still the loser here. You're still losing because you still have to sit there and take it and smile and pat her on the back and be like, I'm sure it'll be okay with Laddie and Hugh. Don't worry, it'll be okay. And all of that just so that she is not as cold and difficult and she'll actually see you. So you've got to sit there and listen to her go on and on about her wild life and just sort of like swallow it and be like, well, just if I can be of any help to you and Laddie, you just let me know, don't worry about it, telling little jokes and trying to like, help her out of her difficulties as she's feeling low about the boyfriends. It's like, no, Dicky, no, this isn't an improvement. This isn't an improvement. It feels like one because she's sticking around long enough to talk to you about all her problems, but it's not an improvement. For a little while, they did experience some married bliss. Edwina made the best of her new life, entertaining her husband's colleagues, but also her friends. Ted Phillips stayed at the beginning of June. As part of their economy drive, their boat Shrimp had been sold, but the Cunningham Reeds had lent them their yacht, and there was frequent expeditions and picnics around the coast. Dicky had taken up water skiing and become so proficient he used to water ski to shipboard parties in full mess dress tie, his shoes and socks around his neck. Soon Edwina began to enjoy herself. She was proud of her husband, whose career flourished. But the ideal couldn't last. No, it could not. Because now the scandal is going to break. Now, brace yourselves. The scandal that's reported is but a tinge of reality. But the reality is still there. So, in May 29th, 1932, the Sunday newspaper, The People, under the heading Society Shaken by Terrible Scandal, an anonymous gossip columnist had written, I'm able to reveal today the sequel to a scandal which has shaken society to the very depth. It concerns one of the leading hostesses in the country, a woman highly connected and immensely rich. Her association with a colored man became so marked that they were the talk of the West End. Then one day, the couple was caught in compromising circumstances. The sequel is that the society woman has been given hints to clear out of England for a couple of years to let the affair blow over, and the hint comes from a quarter which cannot be ignored. What an annoying little piece of society gossip. I just hate that kind of stuff. Like, listen, everybody, I got a little hint to tell you. Now, I'm not going to spell it out for you, but it's just like, who even cares? Who would even read these things? It was clear the article referred to Edwina, and the quarter that could not be ignored was Buckingham Palace. I hear that vulgar socialist Sunday paper, The People, has published what Norman Brickett calls a particularly outrageous form of libel about Edwina and the black man, Dicky wrote to his mother. The Mountbattens were unclear what to do. We both don't want to add to the publicity by a notorious libel case, but cannot allow her to be thought guilty by taking no action. After taking legal action and under pressure from the palace, they decided to press ahead with court action against the people and its owners, Odin's Press. The case was heard on July 8th, with the well-known barristers Norman Brickett acting for Edwina and Patrick Hastings for Odoms. It was held at the unusually early time of 9:30 a.m. without any advance notice to the press, so that there was little reporting, and both Edwina and Dicky were unusually allowed to give evidence. Edwina claimed that she had never in the whole course of my life met that man referred to, and the Lord Chief Justice, Lord Hewitt, ruled in her favor. Odoms made a full apology, and Edwina, claiming to be satisfied, did not press for damages. Suspicions remained that a deal had been done. That night, the Mountbattens celebrated with a party at Café de Paris, and, as a marking of solidarity, the King and the Queen entertained them to lunch at Buckingham Palace the next day, and the Prince of Wales threw a party on the eve of their departure for Malta. There were, however, no winners. The palace and Dicky were unhappy about all the publicity, and it only strengthened Edwina's republicanism, furious that she had been forced to submit to this public indignation. Henceforth, she swapped the Daily Herald for the Daily Worker. Now, was this true? Like, where did this story even come from? You know, she's had many a lover, so the fact that somebody would decide to write about, what a terrible scandal, she's having a relationship with a black man. Okay. But I guess, at that time, that was considered scandalous. And so where did this story come from? The black man was supposedly a man named Paul Robeson, whose Othello had recently taken the West End by storm, and whom Edwina was to claim both in court and in her diary. I have never met. The people supposedly spent £25,000 trying to find evidence that the two had met at least once, but with no success. £25,000 to see if she had met some guy, some actor who probably she had, because everyone had met this guy. He was quite the toast of the elite at that time. So it's surprising that no one would even admit that they had run in the same circles. But Dicky's official biographer, Philip Ziegler, does argue, even if one accepts that she lied in her private diary and that she was prepared to perjure herself, it seems inconceivable that none of the many fellow guests who must have witnessed Robeson's presence was ready to testify to that effect in court. Well, here's the only problem with that. It was considered so scandalous for her to have been in a relationship with a black man that the people, unless somebody really had an axe to grind against her, I think people may not have said what they knew so that they would not shame her. So some people have suggested that Edwina possibly lied in her own diary because she didn't want Dicky to read her diary and know all the details about life. I don't know if I find that credible, because her life was lived so wildly and chaotically. What of? If Dicky found out about one other thing. So I don't know. It seems strange. Let's keep going. According to Edwina's official biographer, Janet Morgan, every guest who came to Brook House or Adstein, every entertainer of significance who performed at her house was mentioned in her daily diary there for her own records, and was a note of every outing with every lover. Robeson's name does not appear. She further pointed out that even Robeson's wife did not believe the story. Robeson's wife had said, "It is most incredible that people should be linking Paul's name with that of a famous titled English woman, since she is just about the one person in England that we don't know." So it would seem that Edwina truly didn't know who this person was, or hadn't spent any time with him in any significant way. Nobody could link them together. However, just when you're about to be like, so I guess the story's made up, there's no reason that Edwina would commit everything to her diary, and even Morgan admits that Edwina doctored her writing in case Dicky read it. Equally, there's no reason Robeson's wife knew everything about his private life. The writer Marie Seton, who knew all parties concerned, said Robeson had told her that he did go to bed once with Edwina, that she had been the seducer, and he had accepted that she had never met him, but it jarred inside him. The black singer Leslie Hutchison told a friend, Bill Pilkington, that Edwina and Robeson had had a brief affair. Edwina's sister Mary later told the Mountbatten biographer Richard Huff Edwina admitted that she had lied in court. Now, this is just so difficult because Mary, as you'll recall, was not well in her head. She had bouts of explosive rage and had to go to a sanatorium to recover after she had attacked Dicky and broken up his whole room. So I don't know. I mean, could Mary be trusted with that statement? Okay. But regardless of what Mary said, Long after, Edwina made that same admission while still having dinner with Catherine Courtney and her husband in Candy, Ceylon. Mountbatten talked openly of the, quote, whitewash in the court case with Robeson. Edwina just stayed silent until she said, well, it's over now. What else could I have done? According to Huff, the figure most deeply affected was Paul Robeson. For Edwina to stand up in court and declare that she had never met him, when their relationship had been so close, and when he had been invited to her house frequently, and been seen there with dozens of her friends, deeply wounded him, and he never got over it. But see, I don't understand why she would exclude him from her diary of people who came and went from her house, and people that she knew, and individuals that she had relationship with, when she noted every other one, including this next gentleman who was also black. So why would she let the whole world know that she was friends with Hutch Hutchison, but she can't bear for anybody to know that she knows Paul Robeson? Like, that doesn't make sense to me. Why would she draw the line against him? He was like this famous actor who had played in Othello, and people were like incredibly stunned at his incredible performance. This is a person who would have run in circles that she would have respected. So why can she suddenly be super buddy-buddy with Hutch Hutchison? But God forbid, Paul Robeson entered the picture? That's where I don't know. I don't understand any of this. The book goes on to say that if the, quote, colored man that was described in the article wasn't Robeson, could it have been someone else? She certainly knew the other best-known black entertainer of the period, the singer and pianist Leslie Hutch Hutchison. He had played in private concerts at the homes of many of her friends, including Marjorie Brecknock, and she had presented him with a gold cigarette case engraved with her name and supposedly a loving message. Whenever she gave a party, Hutch played for her, explained Edwina's daughter Pamela. It was the habit of society women to give the entertainers presents rather than to pay them. Hutch had been born in Granada in 1900, but left as a teenager to study medicine in New York. A musical prodigy, he quickly switched to music and started performing in the clubs of Harlem, where he was taken up by the Vanderbilts. Through them, Edwina had most probably first seen him perform in Harlem and Palm Beach, and in 1924 she had recommended him as a piano teacher to the children of King Alfonso and Queen Ina of Spain. The affair between Queen Ina and Hutch was an open secret. The writer Leslie Blanche later remembered, lunch alone with Lady Mountbatten at Buck House, her infatuation for the pianist Hutch was a hushed-up scandal. According to Hutch's biographer, Charlotte Breeze, Edwina and Hutch may have become lovers in Harlem in 1925 when he went off to Spain and they met up again in Paris. Hutch often performed at Zelli's in Paris, where Edwina was a regular visitor. She brought him over in the autumn of 1926 to play at a reception in Carlton House Terrace, given with a socialite friend, Lady Gibbons, and he played in London venues that the Mountbattens and their circle frequented, such as the Café de Paris and Chez Victor. At Chez Victor, he used to sing directly to Edwina Mountbatten, who on one occasion took off her chiffon scarf and put it around his neck and kissed him while he was playing, remembered Joan Vivian, a young socialite. He sang "The Man I Love" to her. He was madly attractive and intelligent. How we envied her. So this all leads to the question of, Edwina clearly didn't care if people saw her as being attracted to this black man. She obviously looked at him as being very talented because he was, very intelligent because he was, and he was considered a catch even in their circles. So I'm confused because this young socialite, Joan Vivian, who says that they all envied her because he was so attractive and intelligent. I don't know when Joan said that. Did Joan say that in present day when she was being interviewed about, back in the day when you were a young thing running around? Is she reinterpreting her feelings because she doesn't want to sound as though she was scandalized at the idea of Edwina with a man of color? So it's difficult because it's like, if everyone envied her and everyone was like, oh, lucky you, then how could a paper write about it and act like it was a terrible scandal if everyone collectively was like, good catch, Edwina? Why would anybody be scandalized by that? And I don't understand why the whole idea of her with this other guy would have been hushed up if that were true. If she very clearly and openly had something for this Leslie Hutch Hutchison. I don't understand what is happening here. Okay, but things are going to get a little weird. Remember how that article suggested that Edwina had been found with a black man in a compromising circumstance? It could be any man at this point. It could be Paul. It could be Hutch. Who knows? It seems more likely that it was Hutch. But the compromising circumstances that had occupied the gossip article were supposedly Hutch and Edwina being inextricably united through vaginismus, a rare and temporary medical phenomenon in which you become locked together in intercourse, and they had to be taken by ambulance from the Mountbattens home at Brook House to a hospital where they could be treated. Yeah, that is pretty wild. We know that Edwina did seem like she had some gynecological issues, so potentially she did find herself in this situation. As we're going to go on to see, how do I put this delicately? Hutch was very well endowed, and you wonder if Edwina just physically couldn't take it. The book goes on to say that I was at a grand party. Edwina interrupted Hutch playing the piano, the BBC producer Bobby J. recalled. She kissed his neck and led him by the hand behind the closed doors of the dining room. There was a shriek, and a few minutes later she returned straightening her clothes. Hutch seemed elated, and before he returned to the piano told me that, with one thrust, he had flashed her the length of the dining room table. Okay. Shocking behavior from all parties around. Well, I'll tell you, I think the most disappointing thing would be if you ever scaled the echelons of society and found out that this is how folks were doing each other. You know, interrupting the entertainment so that he can run around to the dining room table, close the door, and flash her. And then she's over there giggling and laughing and, scurrying back into the room, straightening her clothes. I mean, what kind of behavior is this? Trashy. But I'll tell you who wasn't appreciating any of this and didn't think that any of this was cute or clever. And that was Dicky. He really disliked this. Now, I'm bothered by the fact that Dicky can finally arouse himself to injury simply because, in my estimation, he's mad because it's a black guy that his wife is fooling around with. Why wasn't he indignant about all the other guys that she's with? Well, I'll tell you. Because he believed all those other guys were better than him. He believed that they were all richer than him. They made banter more easily. They were more relaxed than he was. They didn't seem to have this pressing need to compete all the time and prove themselves. They were just, he was intimidated by how easy they were with themselves and therefore easy with his wife, which was something he could not seem to do. In Dicky's estimation, this black man is less than him, and his wife is still choosing Hutch Hutchison over him. So if you're Dicky, you're sitting there in a whole new sense of rage because it's like it was bad enough when she was choosing other guys, but I can figure out why. And now he looks at Hutch and he sees somebody who by the very din of their coloring is less than him. Now, if he wanted to look at the guy's life experience, his intelligence, and his musical abilities, he might have realized that, no, once again, here's somebody who has skills and talents that you will never come close to. But he's not looking at all of that. He's just looking at the fact that in his mind, this man is less than him, and this man should not be winning. Now, the band leader, Alfred von Stratton, noted in his diary a night in the early 1930s when Dicky came in to Quaglino's, very drunk, and sat with him. "I am lonely and drunk and sad," he complained. "That N-word Hutch has a prick like a tree trunk and he's effing my wife right now." So, he's angry. In the hearing of one socialite, Joan Vivian, Mountbatten exploded, "If I ever catch that man Hutch, I'll kill him." In both cases, the violence of his language has the ring of truth and speaks of pent-up pain and jealousy. For once, Edwina had much in common with Hutch, both promiscuous and uninhibited about sex. They were charming, funny, and did not mind if they shocked people. Each gave the other an entree to worlds that intrigued them, but they could not enter alone. Hutch had far more to gain socially from Edwina's company and contacts, but through him, she could relax in a milieu that amused her, away from the responsibilities and restrictions of her marriage. The affair with Hutch was to continue off and on for the next 30 years. His other lovers would include many of those in the Mountbatten social circles, both men and women: Merle Oberon and Princess Marina of Kent, Cole Porter, Noel Coward, and Ivor Novello. It was in 1932 that Dicky was to have his own first affair with a woman who would become his principal mistress until his death over 40 years later. Iolo Letelier was in her 20s, and the third wife of Henry Letelier, one of France's most successful newspaper owners and a man 40 years her senior. The owner of Le Journal, then the world's third largest selling newspaper and co-developer of both Deauville and Cannes, Letelier was one of France's most powerful men, reputed to own 1,260 suits, 11 motor cars, a champagne marquis, a racing stable, Mexican oil fields, and real estate scattered throughout Europe and South America. Whoa. Mystery continues to surround Yola. Born Yvonne Henriquet, probably in 1904. She gave dates ranging from 1900 to 1907, so nobody knows. She also used the names Henriques and Henriquez, while the dates of her marriage to Letelier vary between January 1926 and 1928. With her heart-shaped face, freckles, and long legs, she was chic, animated, attractive, intelligent, undemanding, and affectionate. Her aunt had been a friend of Colette, and supposedly Yola was the inspiration for Colette's 1944 novella, Gigi, filmed 5 years later about a young girl who falls in love with a much older man. Dicky had first met her playing polo in Deauville in 1928, and then again in April of 1932, while still staying friends in Cannes. Dicky was thrilled to discover that another woman found him attractive. Well, when Dicky finally decided to tell Edwina what was going on, she hated that. Dicky, of course, doesn't seem to get that he is not in a relationship in which he has the same rights that his wife has. He goes, "I told her the news," Dicky writes in his diary. Amazing heart to heart. But Edwina was furious. She was allowed lovers, but not her husband, and immediately left for Paris to confront Yola. "Your girl is sweet," she wrote to Dicky, "and I like her. And we got on beautifully, and we are gummed, and I am lunching with her at her house on Tuesday. Exclamation point, exclamation point, exclamation point." Well, so a lot of false cheerfulness there. She hates it, and that's the end of that chapter. I found that chapter to be a little bit dull. So hopefully the next chapter will be better. I had high hopes because it was called A Terrible Scandal. But to me, I just felt like it was just, sort of a ho-hum story of yet one more exploit that she has. It just happens that it was with a black guy. And of course, I know like back then it's supposed to be real shocking, but I'm not shocked. I think I'm more shocked just about the way that she flaunts her lifestyle and just doesn't seem to want to bear any responsibility. Like, that's way more shocking to me. And I think it's shocking. That's probably the part that shocks most of us. It has nothing to do necessarily with who she's sleeping with, but it's how frequently she leaves the marriage bed and acts like it's her right. And it is a little bit shocking that she would even think that at this late date, after she's just run through hundreds of men, that she could even stand up to Dicky and be like, "A mistress? Are you kidding me right now? What?" But it's going to be a weird dynamic with the three of them because Dicky brings that girlfriend around openly. And I mean, Edwina's been doing the same for a long time, but there's pictures of him with one arm around his wife and the other arm around his mistress, and they're all like very cozy. And it's like, what's going on here, you guys? What is happening? So this book is weird. These people are twisted. I can't even believe what is happening here. But, one thing I've realized from reading all these books is I thought, in all of my naivete, that there was a way that people behaved when they reached a certain echelon. That not that everybody always said and did the right things, but that there was this expectation that you carry yourself with a certain amount of dignity. But then you come to find out, no, it isn't actually like that at all. I think, what it's like when my husband was in the military and we went to our first military ball, and he was an officer, and I had in my mind this idea that it was going to be like this really posh and lovely and cultured event, and it wasn't. And I just remember being almost horrified at how like grotesque and hedonistic the event was. And that at one point, the officer above him, he was a lieutenant, but his captain was throwing up and falling asleep drunk in his plate of food at dinner. And I just remember being so disappointed, just thinking like, in my mind, it was always going to be this one thing that one day, if I ever got to be in the hallowed halls of any sort of exciting place, and to me at the time, an officer's dinner, an officer's ball was supposed to be like nice. And I just remember looking at him and just think at this guy who's like falling asleep, throwing up, and like can't sit up, and he's like, his face was in his plate of food, just thinking, wow, you finally get to a place and it's so disappointing. But I think so much of life is like that. If we pin all our hopes on like what this world can offer us, it's always going to be disappointing. It's always going to let you down. It always will. Even the best laid plans, the best vacation. I'm not talking about even the worst of things. Like the best of things that you can get eventually are going to let you down. There's only one way for it. I mean, I don't intend to preach at the end of this, but as I'm reading this, I'm just thinking, if we pin our hopes and we place our ambition in anything here in the world, it's going to disappoint us. Like God's the only one who doesn't disappoint us. We think that, poor Dicky in this book, I mean, he's looking so desperately for his wife to love him and to like him enough to stick around. So he's putting himself in all these compromising positions, just even emotionally and morally, letting her get away with things he's not comfortable with, just because he wants her to keep liking him. And it's all for what, But he's pinned all his hopes and dreams on this one person making him happy, and they never can. No, everyone's going to disappoint us. Everybody and everything. And every next level that you scale is going to be a colossal disappointment. God's the only one who isn't, So just leaving you with that thought. All right, I will see you guys later this week. And, okay, I know where my bread is buttered. Unfortunately, my bread is buttered by the people who love the Harry and Meghan drama. I have had this book for a long time. It is an Omid Scobie book, so it's straight propaganda. But so was Spare, and we loved that. So I'm thinking, just to sort of help myself along here, as the summer months open up, that unfortunately I'm going to have to bring out a little bit of this. So if this isn't your cup of tea, don't worry. We're going to be doing the Mountbattens as well. But I think that over the next couple of weeks, I'm going to be opening up 2 books at once, and one of them is going to be this book. I hate that I have to do it. I really do. But I also know what people want to see. And unfortunately, what people want to see is drama that they've rehashed 1,000 times. But they like more of it. So we're going to do that. But we're going to keep doing the Mountbattens as well. All right. I will talk to you guys later. Bye.